All right, so you host and you founded this great podcast, NBA Now and Then. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that and what the thought process and theory behind your podcast is, and what got you started wanting to have this podcast.
All right. First thing, I want to ask you a question, Phil,
Uh oh.
and it's related to what you just asked me. We're talking about NBA now and then, the greatest comparisons. So you mentioned LeBron a few seconds ago.
Hmm.
Who is the GOAT in your opinion?
Michael
You know where
Jordan.
I'm going with this. No. Oh, Michael
Yeah.
Jordan and LeBron James. You say Jordan, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So tell me why.
Um, because I grew up watching him, and he was the greatest player I ever saw. And
Okay.
LeBron is, and let me say this: like when we've had this argument and discussion on this show with the commenters before. It's not disrespecting LeBron James. I think LeBron James is clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, the second greatest player of all time. And I think the margin, the distance between who's one and two is a lot
Right.
closer than people realize. It's
Right.
just, I got to watch Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
There was not a thing that Michael Jordan couldn't do, and LeBron lost sometimes in the finals.
Okay.
And that's plain and simple. Just like I probably ranked Joe Montana higher than I should on my quarterback of all time list because he
Because we
was
watched
undefeated in
Joe.
the championship game. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. So the reason why I asked you that is because we look at this debate situation, especially in the NBA. I mean, I'm sure there are sports fan bases that argue football or who's the better baseball player, but something about NBA players we love to compare. And the Jordan LeBron debate, that's going to go on for decades long
Hmm.
after we're gone, right? But the
Absolutely.
reason why I asked you that is because there's really no objectivity when it comes to the argument because, and I guess we all fall into this category is when we're comparing players, we usually stick with our guy, the guy
Hmm.
that we grew up watching, or the guy that's on our team. And what NBA Now and Then does is we try to compare players from different eras using objectivity. And what we do, Phil, is we focus on the player's background,
Hmm.
statistics, accolades, and probably the most significant category, teammates. So whether you pick LeBron or whether you pick Jordan, eventually we'll come out with that episode. We're going to bring all the facts. And the thing, Phil, is it's not about our opinion. We lay out the facts so that the fans can say, wow, I didn't realize this side of the argument. Or
Hmm.
maybe they say, this is our guy. They draw a line in the sand and say, don't cross it because this is where I stand on LeBron. This is where I stand on whoever. And we give you the facts so people can be like, wow, that's interesting. Like the aspect of how a player grew up or the teammates that that player had. And that's what we lay out. We peel back layers of their careers so that people can say, wow, I didn't know that about those players.
That's really interesting. So, what are some of the most recent episodes? What are some of the players that you've done for those that aren't familiar with your stuff
Man,
that you've compared recently?
dude, we have over 20 episodes, 20 comparisons. Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie Irving, Larry Bird to Luka Doncic, Paolo
Oh,
Banchero
hold on,
to,
you mentioned Luke or the Larry Bird comparison a few minutes ago. Look at
yeah,
that, drawing
yeah,
parallels to the interview here.
there
Okay.
we go. There we go. So Paolo Banchero to Blake Griffin, Joel Embiid to Hakeem Olajuwon, James Harden to Allen Iverson. These are some of the episodes that we've already recorded. Each episode is over an hour, hour and a half. The AI and Harden episode was 2 hours, just so you know, because there's so much to unpack with those two players. But we have a lot of episodes. And the one thing about our podcast, Phil, that I say distinguishes us from all the other podcasts, and there's a space for debate style podcasts. Fans
Absolutely.
need to go somewhere where they can connect with guys like you who have frustration over their coach or their
Hmm.
favorite team's players. But we're kind of a break of the norm. We give people an opportunity, just kind of like if you're mowing the lawn or you're on a jog somewhere, you can pop a send and be like, wow, I want to hear this Iverson and Harden comparison. Different eras, but two dynamic scorers, guys that are cultural icons for different reasons. But man, some really interesting similarities between those two
Which
players.
one? So you mentioned some great comparisons and stuff like that. Which one was the hardest to discuss that you've done? Ones that you really like. You're laying out all the facts for player A. You're laying all the facts out for player B, and you're just
Right.
like, this is a really tough one to compare. We also got another interesting one here. Deebs is saying you got to do Tyrese Maxey to Steph Curry. I'm not sure if I'm ready to
Oh,
put Maxey on that level yet, but
okay.
yeah, I mean there's
Actually,
an interesting one.
yeah, well, Maxi is definitely on our radar. And we actually did a Steph Curry comparison. And we did a comparison. And actually, this was tough because Steve Nash, 2-time MVP, one of the greatest shooters statistically of all time. Steph Curry, probably the greatest shooter in terms of distance and volume of all time. We compare those two players, and their similarities are striking. Two guys that weren't really recruited coming out of Santa Clara or Davidson. Both guys didn't even really get many Division I offers, to be honest with you. But it was tough to compare those two because of their impact. You had Nash in the 2000s with the 7 seconds or less offense in Phoenix. Amazing player, 2-time MVP. Steph Curry, same deal. Now, Steph Curry has more championships, but in terms of impact and how they played, it was kind of hard to distinguish those two.
When you're peeling back all these layers, do you take into account, because I saw somebody, I think it was Missed Up here, he said that Jordan would average 50 points in today's game, and I've heard that argument before. Do you take into account also breaking down different eras, because the game was different in the 80s than it was in the 90s, then it was, again, it's different now. Every 10 or 12 years there's an evolution of the game, and that's got to be taken into account when you're comparing these players as well, right? Because LeBron, you can look at LeBron versus Michael, and you're like, totally different eras, you're totally different types of athletes as well. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to take into it. How much does the era that they played in, play into your discussion?
That's a perfect question. Well, I'll give you an example. Sixers fans, Joel Embiid, Hakeem Olajuwon. We did that comparison a few months ago. And if you look at the era of where Embiid plays now versus when Olajuwon played in the 80s and 90s, that whole style was all about post play. But now you have Embiid, who's out on the wing and he's making moves like a guard, which is unfathomable, especially for someone who grew up like us watching that style of basketball. So we do take it into account, whether it's referees and the rules change or the whole explosion of three-point shooting. We do take into account those aspects of our comparisons. We do.
I mean, I'm not sure how old you are, Ryan. I'm not trying to call it your
47.
age.
No, I'm 47.
Sorry?
47.
47. Oh, you're older than me. Okay, so
yeah, I just shaved. That's why.
Yeah, you got a young look to you. I wasn't sure how.
Yeah.
So so then you'll get this question. Do you prefer the style of play in the NBA now? You grew up like me in the 80s, there was a certain type of basketball that we grew up watching and enjoying. And it's really hard sometimes to watch the style nowadays and how it's played. Even the 90s. I preferred the 90s era basketball even sometimes to the way it's played nowadays.
Dude, I'm vibing with that 100%. I think there's a mixture of how we grew up watching hoops to what we see now. And it's frustrating because there seems to be an imbalance. All I want is an imbalance. I'm fine with 3-point shots. I'm fine with offenses taking advantage of spacing and the athleticism of these players and the enhancement of their shooting ability. That's great. But I think what's missing is a little balance. You know what I mean? And you know, you look at how the Knicks played, unfortunately, Sixers fans, like the Knicks, they were cutting, they were moving. It was like the Villanova Knicks, right? Those guys were cutting and moving, and there was motion. I think that's missing, especially from the Sixers offense. But as far as the errors, yeah, I definitely miss the balance. And actually, back in the day, like when the 3-point line was invented, it was like they rarely shot threes. So there was an imbalance there. And then in the 80s and 90s, particularly 90s, it balanced out. And now today it's just all 3-point shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. Big Al always with the greatest question of the day. How many orbital fractures would Joel have had if he played back in the day? Man, could you imagine something? Like that's almost like, and I'm not trying to throw more work on you. You need to now have a new podcast comparing maybe not just players, but like taking the 96 whatever team and comparing it to the 2020, like comparing teams, not just players from different eras, and how that, like, we got people like saying, how would the 2000 where was it here, the 2000 Pistons, how would they survive in today's NBA, or the Spurs with Tim Duncan and David Robinson, how would they survive in today's era? I just gave you another podcast idea right there.
Well, we actually brainstormed. We have a lot. I mean, we have so much content on the way. Season 1 is almost through, but we're going to be comparing signature moves, dunks, top commercials. We did our first categorical comparison. We did the 1996 and the 1984 draft classes. So
Okay.
Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, John Stockton, we compared that draft to 1996, AI, Kobe, Steve Nash. That's a really interesting episode because it takes you back and it allows you to be like, wow, which draft actually had the better players come out?
Okay. So real quick again, guys, we got Uriah Young, now NBA Now and Then, and also writer for PSN, Sixers writing team there. Two more questions before we get you out of here today. Question one: it'll be Mavs, it'll be Celtics. What's your finals prediction, and how's it going to play out? And how disappointed are Sixers fans going to be when the Celtics win the championship?
Oh man.
So I basically answered the question for you.
Yeah. Thanks for swaying me just a little bit. No, I think this is Boston's championship to lose. I think they have all the right pieces. They have a good coach. They have, watch this, Phil. They have continuity. Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. They've been playing together for almost 6-7 years, and you can tell that those guys, not only do they play for each other, but they understand each other. They can read each other. And that's the type of continuity that unfortunately the Sixers have never had. And I'm getting off topic.
No,
I
it's okay.
say Celtics, obviously they're going to sweep Indiana, and I think Minnesota is going to get swept. Dallas, I'm not going to sleep in them because anytime you have Luka and you have Kyrie, who's crazy clutch,
Yeah,
championship experience.
I totally forgot about the Kyrie Boston
Yeah.
thing. Like for some reason,
Oh,
I wasn't even thinking about that. Like
that's
it
such a
totally slipped
great
my mind.
that's such a great subheading, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So I'd say if those two square off, I go Boston in 6.
You
I go
have a little
Boston in
When you
6.
said Boston, there, are you from Boston? You had a little Boston accent when you just
Nah,
said
man.
Boston. You just said Boston.
Boston.
I don't even think you said it like that. Boston. You definitely said it like that Sam Adams commercial.
Boston. Yeah.
All right. So there is one final question that we ask every single guest that I have on this show. Even if I have them on 4 times, I ask them the same question
Right.
4 times. Okay. It's very simple. And I can't believe nobody in the comments has reminded me because they make sure to remind me every time I have a guest on. Really simple. Is it Goodfellas or is it Godfather?
Uh I know
Most
people are
people,
gonna
I
hate on
expect
me.
quick answers from people, but I get the same, I don't know, every single time.
It's like I think with The Godfather, it's like what happens in the higher ups. Where
Mhm.
Goodfellas, you kind of see what happens like on the street level and in the behind the scenes. And I, I'm just gonna go tie, man. I can't pick. Maybe I'll
That is
rewatch.
the most are you like running for political office or something
No,
like
no, no.
that?
I'm
Like,
gonna tell you why, because I haven't seen The Godfather in years. So next time come on, I will have an absolute decision. Godfather or
how
or
do you never
Goodfellas.
seen how have you never seen Goodfellas? It's like yeah, that's
No,
I
I've
think
seen
that
Goodfellas. Oh, the guy.
no, I
Oh,
know, but
the guy.
him saying
Yeah,
that, I don't know how anybody could do that.
yeah.
All right, when's your next podcast coming out? Give out all the links, the website, which I did link the website to your
Thank you for
podcast
doing
in the
that.
description for anybody that wants to find
Thank
Uriah
you for
Young
doing
slash
that.
knows. But give everybody all the details on everything they can find from you.
Sure. The first thing I want to say before I give details is I have the best team that any podcaster could ever ask for. Lucas, Maurice, Ben, and Winston, those guys know their hoops. They're very articulate. They explain their aspects of their segment meticulously and almost flawlessly. I mean, I do some of the editing, but the bottom line is I have a great team. And we have some really cool stuff coming up, Phil. So the NBA has a merger or partnership with the Kendall Jackson Wine Company. And a PR agent from Kendall Jackson reached out to us to see what we could do to help bring some light to this merger, or basically to see how we can help get the idea of, okay, beer, liquor, but wine is a thing too. So Kendall Jackson has partnered with the NBA, and we're doing a wine comparison episode. We're comparing a James Harden wine to a Dwyane Wade wine. Yes, haven't tried them yet. I'm waiting for the episode. So, and in the midst of that, we got a Kendall Jackson Cabernet and a Kendall Jackson Chardonnay. So that's going to be an upcoming episode. And I think our final episode in terms of player comparison, we're going to be doing Jalen Brunson to Chauncey Billups. That's going to be that's a really interesting episode.
That sounds interesting right there. So hold on, let me pull it up here. It's NBA. I can't read my glasses. NBANowandThen.com is your website. At YouYoung87, I believe, is your Twitter
No,
handle.
76. You Young 76. Yeah,
You
it's
Young
right there
76.
on the
Sorry,
screen.
the glasses aren't working very well this morning, so I can't read that far away. Guys, make sure you're finding Uriah Young. Make sure you're finding his podcast. Make sure you're following all his work. Uriah, thank you very much for your time this morning. Have a great Memorial Day.
Thanks, Phil. You too, buddy. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Guys,
All
that
right.
was Uriah